to that, just drop us a note in the chat function. So let's get going. Let's have a look at what today's around. So we're going to be showing you who's on today's panel. That's what we've not done really any introductions just as yet. That's going to be on future slides. Then we're going to be looking at the technical qualification specification core content. We're going to run through each outcome and give you the opportunity to ask questions on that outcome or discuss that outcome. We're going to give you an overview of the assessment core content. Now, the detail around that might be dependent on time. It depends how many questions we get. If we don't get a chance to cover all that, we'll just ask people to mute who are joining the meeting, please. Depending on time, we'll see how much we get done of that. If we don't get to cover that, it's not the end of the world. We're going to put on a specialist session for that and look at the assessment of the core content in detail. A colleague of mine, Alison's got some great material on that, and we don't want to just brush over it. So dependent on time will depend on how much we go through with that. So we're going to be going through the 14 knowledge outcomes of BSE core and the assessment requirements for the outcomes. What we're not going to be looking at today is the occupational specialisms, anything to do with progression. Obviously that topic is still a hot topic. We don't want things, to take over around progression, industry placements or anything like that. And what we're not doing today, we're not reviewing the content. That's already been done. Centres have been involved, employers have been involved, decisions have been made that this is now the content, the qualification's live. So we're not in a position to alter the content. We are in a position to support you getting an understanding of that content around delivery, and obviously a lot of the core content is new, hence the sessions. So let's move on. Let's have a look at who's with us today. People will probably put the videos on later on, but we've got Jason Howe, who's my equivalent technical advisor for construction. As you can see, I'm on the slide there with a bit less of a beard. I'm Rob Ballinger, technical advisor for building services. And then we've also got colleagues from our partners, EAL on T levels, Mike Scarrett is product specialist, and Alison Whittle, who's technical advisor for post 16, but as well as that, supporting us with a lot of the delivery guidance and assessment principles around T levels. And Alison's got a great background in that area. So without further ado, you should all have a copy of the technical specification. I dropped that in the chat earlier. What I'm going to do before we move on, I'm just going to drop a link to the document again. The link should take you to the centre documents, where you should be able to find that under centre documents if you haven't got that in front of you already. It might help you facilitate the meeting if you've got a separate device, you want to access that on a phone or whatever. We are going to be looking through obviously the core material which is in that document. So if you hopefully you've had a chance to look at that previously and you've come armed with any questions you've got. So without further ado, I don't want to waste any precious time. I'm going to hand over to my colleague Jason Howe to start and look at the first section, and Jason will take you on from here.
Thanks, Rob. Good afternoon, everybody. So yeah, as Rob mentioned, we're going to sort of look at the detail, or some of the higher detail within the occupational within the core component linked to the outcomes as well. When you look through the qualification handbook, it is just worth noting that within each underpinning knowledge outcome, you've obviously got the criteria, but then beneath that you have what we call a range, and then what the learners need to learn, which obviously takes it in a little bit more detail. So we're going to look more at the knowledge outcomes today. So as one of them that we are familiar with, if we can just move that on, Ali, is health and safety. Now this knowledge outcome shouldn't be a surprise to anybody on this call today, regarding health and safety and how that links into to construction. It's something that we've been delivering for a long time. I'm just going to check we've got somebody isn't on mute. If we can go on mute, please. I can actually mute it. Yeah. So yeah, and it was basically just to give you guys the opportunity, if you want to raise hands, ask any questions on any of the knowledge outcomes and the criteria linked to it. If you do have any questions you want to ask verbally, please, just put your hand up and, we'll take you off mute and you can ask the questions. Or ultimately, as Rob mentioned earlier, you can put any questions you want in the chat as well. So if we have any questions, we'll take them now. Yes, the meeting is being recorded, yeah. There should be no surprises when it comes to the health and safety learning outcome, and we're not expecting, many questions on this outcome at all, because, like I said, it is something that we've been delivering and teaching for a long time. There will be updates, obviously, with regards to legislation and the like, and the regulations, but no real surprises really with regards to the health and safety element. I don't think there's any questions coming in. We are a few more people. The people that have just joined us, if we can ask if you can go on mute, that would be great. But we do welcome, if you want to come off mute, put your hand up, please, and we can take questions and stuff. One colleague is also put in the chat as well. It looks like a platform where they're looking to share resources and share some good practices. So Neil's kindly put a link to that in the chat if people want to visit that as well. And that's a great initiative, because as much as health and safety isn't new within construction, the delivery of some of the content of the core will be new to a lot of people. And where we can share some good practices and have people engaging in the development of the resources, etc., then obviously we would welcome that. I don't think there's any questions coming through, so if you want to move it on, Ali. And obviously hopefully you'll have the qualification handbook open as we're going through this, and then please feel free to highlight any things. Put your hand up, we'll take you off mute, put it in the chat. Ultimately, you can get in touch with us following today's session as well. If there is any questions that you want to pick up later, if you hadn't had as much time as you would like to go through the actual core content and may want to visit it at a later date, then have you identified any consistent knowledge outcomes in other T levels which could be taught together? I'm assuming, are you meaning the construction and BSE, or sorry, construction on site and BSE, or because what we're given ultimately with regards to the T levels, you're given, or as an EO, we were given what's called some outline content, and from that then we have to amplify into a qualification. So with regards to the outline content, that's pretty much standard across the board, especially for construction and BSE. And I believe for the design and principle one as well, the outline content around the core is pretty standardized. So for the core on this component, you could put many of your BSE classes together if you wanted to deliver that, but then just contextualize it to each discipline accordingly during delivery. So this is the construction science principles. Andrew, I don't know if that answers your question, or if you want to feel free to come off mute if you want to ask it, or again, just stick it in the chat and we'll try and pick it up again.
Hi, Jason. Yes, yeah. Andrew Finch here. Hello. I was just asking that question in context to bringing together different groups that have various areas of T levels. So, for example, like you said, everybody does health and safety, and whether you're going to be a plasterer or a chippy or whatever trade you're going to follow. So I'm just thinking, if we've got smaller group sizes, and we might have six guys in one group, but they're all going to study health and safety. Yes, I can bring them all together.
Yeah.
And is there any other subject areas within T levels that could be identified as bringing it together like a health and safety approach, and then going out again to go and do their specific area of subject specialism?
Colleagues might have more input as well, but from speaking to some colleges, a lot of colleges have different delivery models. Some are pulling both, all for construction on site. Forgive us, I know this is BSE, but they're pulling all of the construction on site occupational specialisms together for the core delivery. Some colleges are bringing both construction and BSE together for core delivery as well. But yes, BSE does have more underpin the knowledge outcomes than construction within the core, but for the majority of the delivery, you know, some colleges we've spoke to are going to be bringing those learners together for the delivery to maximise on efficiencies as well, and class sizes and stuff. So yeah, delivery models are different across, you know, a range of colleges and providers. So, but they are seeing obviously a lot of similarities where they can deliver, say, construction and BSE together. So that's the construction science principles. Do we have any, is there any questions specific on that?
Can't see any hands or any specific questions as yet, Jason, if you want to give it a minute or so. So we'll give centres a minute if they want to maybe have a quick look in the handbook at this section to see if there's anything they want to ask about. Feel free.
Whilst you're doing that, a couple of things. Neil's again put in the chat, ETF are offering support from employers like here and BAM to support virtual learning, which is really great. Thanks for that, Neil. And Mike has put a question in around smart screen. Just whilst we're waiting for any questions or any comments, we are developing a smart screen package for T levels, which will focus on the core, and it'll focus on the core only. And our colleagues at Hodder Education are also currently developing a textbook that's going to support the delivery of this, again focusing it on the core at the minute. Those textbooks as well from Hodder will be available in October for BSE, and it's November for construction on site. Smart Screen, we're hoping for it to be available for delivery in September. So Rob, my question is on this, but I'm sure at the last day we were hoping to have it available for the summer.
When I last spoke to Charlie Evans, Jason, who looks after our smart screen products, they were working towards the September deadline to support centres. But what they were looking to do as well is, once they've got a significant amount of material together, is share even the draft material. We want to support centres. It's new, it's new to deliver. So even if the things aren't quite tidied up, they're looking to share some of the material to get people going with this core in September. And as you said, I think the books October and November. BSE I think was October, wasn't it, Jason? And construction November.
Yeah.
So we've got a dedicated book. We've had a question: is there a reading list? Not as such. There is guidance for various sections on British standards and things like that in the various elements of the core which you refer to. But there's going to be a dedicated book and dedicated smart screen to support delivery networks.
I think it's also worth mentioning as well, myself and Rob and colleagues have also looked at using smart screen as a support forum for the delivery of T levels as well. So obviously, because many people can access it, so when we're trying to relay information and stuff, we can use smart screen as that forum to push out that message. It seems to be the most beneficial, as opposed to a social media platform or another online platform. If we can get everybody on the smart screen and where they're accessing the resources, then that will be the preferred platform.
We've got a hand up, Jason. Clinton's got his hand up. Clinton, do you want to unmute yourself? Have you got a question on this topic?
Yeah, how are you doing? Yeah, just while you're actually on the construction science principles. Apologies, I haven't got a video camera on this computer, so I'm just on the mic. But I've actually just been putting our centre Sol together with regards to the construction scientific principles. But I'm sort of looking at 2.5, which is the electricity principles, and there's obviously a range there, and it says the range is the sources of power generation, transmission, distribution, voltage, current, resistance, electrical power, energy and efficiency. And then you've obviously got a little bit of a sort of further instruction in that pink box. So you've got electricity principles in relation to construction process and use of the completed building. So it goes into types of supplies, sources and stuff, which is there's no problem with that. But I do stumble a little bit because it just says circuit protective devices, RCDs, and it's got no further explanation on that. It's just like there. Now, it just seems to be sort of standing out like a sore thumb, because it doesn't seem to have any relevance to the actual range that's been given there. It just seems to be there with no further explanation of what we do with that, and obviously, obviously this is a core unit, so that there could be obviously plumbers and everything else on this. So it's how far do we take a lot of this? You know what I mean?
I would suggest it's the basic operating principles. What they are, what they do. What we will see, and we tried to say at the outset of the meeting, there is going to be little bits of this, and there is in any handbook. We do think, why does that sit there? Why is not that in this section? But unfortunately, things have been tidied up and have been reviewed by various parties, and we sort of are where we are with it. What I will say on something like that, though, Clinton, is if that is just a very brief outline, like it is in that what learners need to know section, there can't be any detail in the assessment, because when the actual consultant writes the assessment, they can only go into the depth that the range goes into. So we can't, let's say, start then going to assess various other protection devices what are not listed there. We could only assess basic operating principles of RCDs just on that topic, just to try and outline the answer to that topic, if that makes sense.
No, it does, and that was a consideration that I was actually thinking about, because that's like to help us interpret. And I thought, if I go back to the range, I would have never ever really considered protected devices in that range at all. If it was me teaching it, it's just obviously that explanation that's obviously there to sort of reinforce and give us that bit of guidance. So no, that does clear that up, and there's obviously a couple of other little examples as we go into that sort of interpretation of the range. Obviously, I won't go into obviously every single one, but that circuit protective devices one was probably a good example. So the RCD one was probably a good example, but I think for me it's just having that clarity that obviously we'll bring it back to the range and make that judgment off the range, because I do think some of the guidance just sort of, when I read that, I wouldn't have associated some of that stuff with what's specified in the range, if that sort of makes sense.
Yeah, and that's what today's about, because there is some, a lot of this outline content we've been given. So we've had to produce a technical qualification from content given by a root panel. So there is some stuff which we see, oh, that's a bit obscure. Why does that sit there? What's that? Why is that in this topic and not where it usually sits? And that's what today's about, because it's a new topic, because the core's new. That's what today is for you to ask those type of questions. So no, don't be sort of apologising for asking questions like that. That's what today is literally about. We're going to be running through each core outcome, and then we're going to be just giving the people opportunity to ask questions after each section. So that's great.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely smashing. Yeah, that's.
I can't see any other hands, Jason. I'm just going to have a look in the chat. I don't know if anybody else.
No, I can't see anything in the chat.
There's just a bit of a hint on that in the chat for you there as well, Clinton. That's great. That's what today's about as well. People giving each other ideas around various sections. But Derek's put in there, RCD is clearly explained in section 11 of the on-site guide. Drawing explanation types, Clinton, may be useful. So brilliant. That's what today's about. We're trying to get some kind of forum set up. It might be a team site or something like that. So when people do start delivering, you can start and share good practice like that as well. But no, Jason, I can't see any other questions on this section. I don't know if you want to move on, mate.
Yeah, and just on that as well, that's where hopefully if we can get the smart screen up and running, the forum would be a good platform for that, and probably one that myself and Rob and colleagues prefer, because it isn't social media, and it's not another login, and well, apart from logging on to smart screen where you'll be able to access resources anyway, it will be a nice forum to share these good practices and give you any more information and stuff. So just moving on, looking at underpinning knowledge outcome number 3. So again, this is all around sort of construction design principles, benefits, design principles, roles, and this is where you will see a lot of crossover where, as it was mentioned earlier, where you'd be able to bring classes together and deliver this knowledge outcome as a sort of larger group as opposed to smaller groups as well. So again, just if there is any questions, any hands up, anything on that. And again, some of these, you know, maybe new, we may have touched on these construction on site background myself, but we would have maybe touched on these slightly in the previous VRQs or technicals. But I think, you know, for the purpose of this new T level, it is going into it in a bit more detail. Just one thing coming. If you're delivering across plumbing, then maybe best to carry out a SWOT. Yeah, and another good thing Neil's mentioned in there as well, which, you know, encouraging centres to do is sort of a SWOT analysis on your staff, or a skills analysis on your staff with regards to, you know, where you've got certain strengths and where you've got where people may not have the knowledge on the delivery as well. So, and then, you know, those sharing good practices and upskilling of staff as well. And I know of a couple of colleges I've been working with where, you know, they've got the CBE technical professionals supporting with this process as well, because of the new detail that's in the core that may not be familiar to tutors who've traditionally delivered VRQs. Not saying that they can't, but it just may be unfamiliar territory for them. So that was the construction design principles. There doesn't seem to be anything coming in on that one either. Again, hopefully you've had a chance to have a look at the core content and the criteria and stuff. And again, if you haven't, then you know, please feel free to drop in some chat or ping us an email at a later date.
Clinton,
we're not. Sorry, go on.
Sorry, mate, to interrupt. Clinton, is that your old hand up, or have you got another point on this? I think it must be an old hand. It's not. I don't know if we can hear you at the moment, Clinton. Are you on mute, or is it an old hand? I think we'll take it. It's an old hand, Jason.
Yeah, Sarah. Unfortunately, we're not going to cover industry placements during today's webinar. The industry placements, just to cover briefly on it, you know, that's a component of the T level that sits outside of our control. The ESFA have got on the gov.uk website, there's a lot of information on T level placements. So if you Google T levels and go onto the government website, there's many links on there with regards to industry placements and stuff that will hopefully be helpful, and there's presentations and stuff. But as such, at the minute, we're not involved in monitoring industry placements or what needs to go in them. That is governed by the ESFA. So hopefully that's helpful for you. But again, if and when we get the Smart Screen forum up and running, that's somewhere where you may want to post some questions for colleagues to respond accordingly, or you know, well, hopefully you can get some information from the .gov website on that as well. Another good one Neil's just put in there. ETF offering funding for all staff training, £200 a day to work with other colleges and employ to develop and train how to deliver a certain topic. And Neil's kindly put his email address in there as well. Can we move it on, please, Alison? We'll go on to the next knowledge outcome. So this is obviously, again, is outcome number 4 about the CBE industry. Again, a lot of this may not be will be new to some people, but not others. We've probably touched on this in previous qualifications, VRQs, technicals, etc., but probably not in as much detail, and a lot of it would have been delivered in, say, technical professional routes, and that's where the beauty of the T level is trying to bridge that gap between technical professionals and the construction, BSE and Onsite teams as well. So again, nothing that really should be any surprises in this knowledge outcome, but again, some stuff that may be unfamiliar to staff as well, and just may need to brush up on a couple of bits prior to delivering these. But this will give learners a fantastic insight and more of an insight into the operational and the wider roles of construction in the BE industry. Again, I don't think there's any questions.
I can't see anything in the chat, Jason. I'm just looking at hands.
Okay.
No, I can't see any hands up at the moment, mate.
Fantastic. Keep the chat going in the chat. Keep the chat going in the chat bar here. Keep the comments coming through on the chat bar as well, especially if you've got areas like Neil kindly has put stuff in there to support colleagues on today's session as well. And if you're aware of other bits and pieces, you know, please feel free to put them in, because you should be able to access the chat following this session as well, so you should be able to refer back to it. We are recording this this session. Just to note though that it will be quite a sizable recording, and we may have to put this on our website for people to access. We won't be able to share it over emails, etc., because it will be such a large recording. So we'll hopefully get it uploaded onto our website. Well, be converted into a YouTube clip, and then obviously we can share the link with you accordingly. Can we move on to the next one, please, Alison? Brilliant. So knowledge outcome number 5 is all around about construction sustainability principles. And again, you know, touched on this previously in other VRQs. I can't speak for BSE entirely, probably covered a lot more of this than, say, the construction on site. But again, new territory for some people, and hopefully a rewarding unit for learners as well, because this is going to become the norm out there in industry. We're seeing this and more of a demand for these types of qualifications. And what I will be doing as well, if everybody doesn't mind, I will be sharing a link to a survey that we produced with regards to our possible green skill qualifications for future as well, which will hopefully help complement the T-level and other programs that you offer as well, and hopefully meet the needs of your employers. Will we also be able to share a delegate list, also collaboration? That's a difficult one for GDPR, but if anybody is happy for anybody else to have their email address, please just put it in the chat. If you're happy to share your details, then you can put your email address in the chat. If you're not happy to share your details, then please don't. But we're unable to share everybody's details, unfortunately. But if anybody is willing to share and collaborate, then please put your details in the chat. Is there any questions or anything on the...
Can't see any hands, Jason, at the moment. I'm just double checking the chat for you.
Thanks. A couple of points to mention as well is the introduction of the heritage in this as well. This will can't speak for BSE, but probably more prominent in the construction on site as well, because that's playing a big part across the industry now as well, with retrofit and everything else coming into play. And obviously energy production and energy use as well, renewable, as I just mentioned, you know, with regards to green skills and the government's agenda of being carbon neutral by 2050, I believe it is.
And with regards to collaboration, this chat will remain live. So, you know, if you find anything useful and you wanted to just access this chat every now and again, I believe you will be able to, you know, send people information and access the chat after the meeting's closed. So it could be another way, if you wanted to keep in touch with people or post things, you could just generally drop into the chat every now and again.
Yeah.
We've just got a few people putting their email address in, Jason, but I can't see anything else apart from a few people dropping contact details in, mate.
All right. Well, I'll hand over to Robert, who's going to take you through the next set of slides, and again we'll just cover more of the knowledge outcomes. But so yeah, thank you for attending today, and if you've got any questions, please put them in the chat, and myself and colleagues will monitor that behind the scenes for Rob. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason. So we'll start and have a look at outcome 6, construction measurement principles. So a lot of this is around the stuff we know and love around accurate, appropriate measurement. So, you know, your measure twice, cut once sort of principles, standard units of measurement and SI units, that type of thing. And it's around good practice as well. So there's a lot of this we maybe not delivered, although we used to deliver in the measurement side of things. There's a lot around the good practice with regards to the mistakes which can be made if things aren't measured effectively and appropriately. There's a lot of that comes into the fray on this unit now. So again, nothing too bizarre, nothing we can't call upon maybe colleagues in other technical professional areas. If we're not quite used to some of that surveying element of it, there's a little bit of that comes into this unit as well. But it's on page 81 to 82. If you want to have a quick look at this, again, we'll give this one a few minutes. If anybody's got any questions on the content of this section, drop something in the chat or raise your hand and we'll come to you in a moment. Okay, we just had a comment. Main concern is how we will interpret the criteria range and what we think learners will need to learn to ensure consistency. I agree with that comment. It's very difficult. That's part of today. You know, if there is anything in there you think you do need a little bit of clarification on, but I agree with that, Dick. It would be then my interpretation, and then the guy who's writing the assessment, it would be their interpretation of these standards and criteria. But I think from experience, we have got a lot more in this qualification than we have in others. We've now got this what learners need to learn section. Sorry, I'm just going to admit somebody. So in the previous qualifications, you'd get your qualification criteria and you'd get the range, but you wouldn't get that what learners need to learn section. And that can go one or two ways. It can almost be, well, I wouldn't have interpreted that range like that, or yeah, it's confirmed what I thought on that. So really, as long as we're following that, I know there's still some interpretation in it, but the course handbook in this is probably more relevant than it ever has been because it's so new. The course so new, and there's a lot of new outcomes in there. So literally, when we get the smart screen live, that should be a very good resource because we're going to have your schemes of training on there, schemes of work, which convert to lesson plans, etc. So that should give you the outcome scope almost to be able to teach from. When they develop those, they usually put links to various materials in there to make them a bit more interactive. And we've had some good feedback around Ofsted, people like that, around the way we designed those. So yeah, you know, it's the old sort of scenario. We don't want to keep referring people to the course handbook, but we probably are going to have to follow the course handbook more than we ever have. That's what our assessment will be audited against. So when they write that assessment, they will make sure it's written within the scope of that range and that what learners need to learn section. We've had another question. Do you know if any colleges have started the BSE delivery already? It would be very helpful to learn of any changes. So the first delivery is September 2021. Well, let's see if we've got any questions on this section. I'll just address that. So September this year is going to be the first time anybody is delivering. Now, there are people on the call who are going to be delivering from September this year, and the majority of people on this call will be involved in a centre who are delivering from September this year, but nobody's delivering as yet. So nobody's ongoing with T-levels. They will be the first people who are actually addressing T-levels September 2021 as part of the Wave 1 and 2 providers. It will not be rolled out to the rest of centres until the following year. So that's when the rest of the centres might pick up. We've had a comment on that from Neil. BTEC have delivered the core. So I'm assuming you're referring to the design and planning T-level there, Neil, which is a very similar core content. Yes, Neil's just commented there. Thanks, Neil. So yes, we have had the design and planning T-level launch last year, which is a Pearson. Well, they got that contract almost and won to start and run and deliver that technical qualification within that. So we have spoke to some centres who started delivering that element, but it's the design and planning construction element of T-level. The core's slightly different. They've put more maths in that core from what I've been led to believe anyway. They've put more maths in the core and they've adapted the core slightly. So we've both been given the same, how can I explain? We've both been given the same outline content for the core, but then they've amplified their content to make their qualification and made it biased towards design and planning. And we've amplified our content to make the technical qualification and amplified it to meet the requirements of construction and building services. So although the core principles are very much the same, the actual qualification could look very different. The core could look very different. Lee's just commented it as a law topic also. That's interestingly, I didn't know that. So yeah, some good stuff going on in the chat there. Derek's just put some resources on there around SI units. Very useful. Thanks, Derek. Keep that coming, even after today. I can't see any questions around this outcome 6, so I'll just have a quick look.
There's no hands.
There's no hands neither, mate. Okay, can we move on then, Alison, if that's okay? Cheers then. So I'll just get the chat back up because that seems to be more active than hands. Outcome 7 then, building technology principles. We have seen some of this within qualifications we've delivered in the past, but probably not in this much detail. We always go on to, content of UK building regulations and approved documents. They're actually listed in the range for this, which is helpful, but they're not going to be going into the delve into the detail within those documents. It's just a familiarization of what those documents are, what's the purpose of them, and which relevant documents are related to construction methods and forms of construction. It also goes into trade associations, what they are, professional engineering bodies, and how they relate to the BSE sector. So, you've got your CIPHE in there, in the professional engineering bodies, and you've got the Association of Professional Heating Contractors in trade associations. So there's different organisations, and it outlines what they are and what the purpose of they are of that industry. There's also obviously the relevant construction bodies in there as well. This unit is in obviously both building services and construction. It goes into how manufacturers' instructions are used, building structure and fabrication principles, and how approved documents are used for guidance, that type of thing. So nothing we've not really dealt with before, but probably a little bit more detail than we used to deliver in our let's say, usual apprenticeship program or VRQ program. So we'll that's page 83 to 86. We'll leave that one up there a minute. Feel free to put anything in the chat or bring up any other topics as well as we're going through this. So free to download. Somebody just dropped a link into a gov.uk website. I don't know if that's one of the colleagues or.
Yeah, someone's put it in the chat.
It's around the approved documents. So link to the approved documents. Thanks a lot for that. Very useful link. Sorry, it was Neil. Thanks, Neil. I couldn't see your name there in the chat. So yeah, anything around that, it's not anything we haven't dealt with before. But again, we'll leave that one up there. Page 83 to 86. Any questions around content? We will obviously get a bit more idea around this. Somebody's going to writing a book at the moment, aren't they? So with regards to the bit nervousness around, I'm not going into too much detail or not enough detail, the scope of the book will also give us a little bit more reassurance around that. The scope of the smart screen will give us a bit of reassurance around that. And I have fed back the two need to collaborate because we're producing smart screen and Hodder are producing books and using probably different consultants. So I have had the relevant discussions with Hodder and Charlie, who's our smart screen manager, to try and bring that the technical detail together. So if you like, what we don't want is contradicting products. Now, how close we'll get them, I'm not sure, because they've both got their own IP, they've both got their own selling points, and they've both got their own marketing opportunities and want to sell their products probably. But we are trying to bring them as close together as possible. I know that's what centres want. How close we can get that, I'm not sure. Similarly, we've also fed back, again, from yourselves, that we need to maybe get the consultants who are writing the actual material involved in the actual briefing for the people who are writing the assessments as well. And we need to make sure the people writing the assessments are very much aware of the scope of the delivery material, so the assessment is aligned. So we're sort of working towards what you want around that. It's just how close we can get that. I can't see anything in the chat on this topic. Is there any hands, do you know, Jason?
No, there's no hands currently. Yeah, no hands.
Okay, we'll have a look at then outcome 8, if that's okay, Alison. So construction information and data principles. This is a lot, probably a lot of new content to what we normally aware of. Data management, confidentiality issues, GDPR, that type of thing, you know. And then it goes into drawings, circuit diagrams, schematics, how we use them, what they're all for. And then also the programming and setup of digital systems. And now this is one which I thought, oh, that's a bit bizarre. How does that sit there? And then it goes into, you know, how to use a lot of the modern day technology with regards to the control and operation of various systems and processes. So yeah, it's probably a new unit. It's 87 to 89 page wise if you want to have a look at that for a few minutes. And any questions, drop something in the chat or raise hands. I'm just going to get that up on my screen at the moment in case anybody does raise anything.
Can't see anything in the chat or any raised hands at the minute, mate.
Okay. We'll crack on then. I think we'll move to the next one. I am mindful of time. So, underpinning knowledge outcome 9, relationship management in construction. Pretty much a lot of the stuff we know and love, which has been in most of the apprenticeships with other bits and pieces thrown in the mix. Styles of communication, employment rights and responsibilities. It does go into the bit more around the, you know, ethics and ethical behaviours, probably aligning it a little bit more with the apprenticeship behaviours we're now seeing in all the apprenticeships. You know, team dynamics, teamwork, how to conduct yourself, customer service principles. So it's a good unit. I like this unit. You know, I think a lot of the world out there, young people today do need to understand how to work with people, colleagues, stakeholders in the various roles they're going to come across in industry. So that's what this one's all about. I don't think there should be too many queries around this unit. It is page 90 to 94 if you want to have a quick look at that and raise anything. We'll leave that up there a minute or so just to have a look at the various bullets. I've just got somebody else dropping back in there. I can't see anything in the chat.
No hands again.
No, there's no hands. Okay. So we'll look at outcome 10 then. Digital technology and construction, Internet of Things. That's a term I don't like personally, but yeah, digital engineering techniques and the opportunities for the use of technology. It's trying to keep things up to and abreast with modern technology implications, applications, and how they can be used in industry. We'll give you a minute or two to look at that one, page 95 to 96. And a lot of this will, again, come in the resource. Around these new topics, if anybody has delivered any of this in technical professional qualifications and anything like that, feel free to share the information. We are looking at maybe setting, up, as we said, the smart screen forum and various things like that. So you can start sharing, as well as obviously we're going to have the resources. You can start sharing various information. So when you look at the course handbook for this, I'm just going to get that up as we speak. We've got a comment there. It's all around smart technology, smart learning, artificial intelligence is even coming into it, you know, but it's not going into that in any detail. It's the different uses of technology connected to the Internet of Things, smart building, smart apps. We're seeing that a lot more now, aren't we? You know, around people are using phones, aren't they, to control central heating systems and things like that. We've got all the building management systems and operation, and now, you know, they're controlled now from apps on iPads and things like that, aren't they? You're not going up to, you know, when I used to be in industry, you're going up to a building management system with a control panel this big on a wall. There is no control panel. The control panel's now on an app on somebody's laptop or iPad somewhere potentially. So it's all getting across how that type of thing works. Yeah, the BMS, how that's now operating, and that type of thing. That's how I read into this unit as well. I'm just going to get the presentation back up there. And Neil's just put on there a little tip there, Skolmore SGTV on YouTube. So there's another little hint for this topic. So can't see anything else on this topic. We'll crack on, I think. I'm going to hand over, I believe, now to Mike Scarrett from EAL, and he's going to take you through the next few underpinning knowledge outcomes.
Thanks, Rob, and afternoon, everyone. I think just to reiterate, one of the purposes of this Teams meeting really is for us all to really get more familiar with the outlying content or the core content, and perhaps focus on some of the areas that we've not been used to delivering before. And maybe this is one of the areas here, which is the construction, commercial and business principles. It's on pages 97 to 100 of the specification there, but it's looking at the business structures and objectives and business values. How do they measure success? A little bit on project management and quality management, etc., etc. So I don't know if there's any comments or any hands want to raise on this one. Certainly a new area to deliver, and it may take some digestion really to get our heads around it in reality. But there's good stuff in there, and all very relevant, but perhaps new to some of us who may not have delivered this before. So any comments on this area, please?
I can't see any hands up, Mike. I don't think there's anything in the chat at the minute either.
No, in the chat either.
Great, thanks. Okay, a lot in that. So let's move on to the next one then, which is a little bit more familiar to us. It's the BSE systems on pages 101 to 104 there. So we're looking at the effects of installation, commission and decommission of BSE systems, mechanical principles of components, electrical supply, earthing arrangements, cables, pipework and ducting, etc., etc. So very much generic BSE core delivery there. Hopefully we've been used to this. This is more familiar ground to us. So any questions on this, please, around the BSE systems? Page 101 to 104.
Not at the moment, Mike. We've had a comment from Lee around the previous outcome, I think, saying business departments within centres could support with this module. That's a good point. Yeah, there's probably a lot of good principles and practices they've got there at the moment.
Great. And Neil's dropped some more resources in there. Thanks, Neil, for that. That's fantastic. Thank you. So anything on this learning outcome 12, please, before we move on? Yeah, Carl's just put there a lot of content to cover, and I think that was one of the main things about this meeting, Teams meeting today, really. It was hopefully, we've got time now between now and it going live in September to have a detailed look at the specification, really, do whatever we need to do to digest it, have a look at, putting some resources together for it, etc., etc., and collaborating together so we can share resources on this as well. But I agree with you, Carl, there is a lot of content to cover really within the first year of the technical qualification. Okay, next slide, please. And this one, again, very familiar to us, really. Maintenance principles, so the types of maintenance, the maintenance plans that we might use, typical timeframes around maintenance tasks, documentation required, and actions required when faults cannot be rectified. So again, pages 105 and 106, hopefully, we should be more familiar with the maintenance principles to deliver this. So any comments on this, please? No? Okay, that's great.
With Mike now, I'll just have a look at hands.
Yeah, no. Any there, Rob? No.
No.
No hands.
All clear.
Yeah, so more a second year subject. It's a good point that Cal. The The window of opportunity, though, for the exam itself is towards the end of the first year. But I take your point on that. Yes.
Just add to that, Mike. Sorry, go on, Rob.
Potentially, I think, though, this is where you can maybe bring in some of the core and relate it to the specialism a little bit as well. So what we've got to look at here, nobody's going to just be able to bring people in on the core and just teach the core without bringing some of the specialisms in, or we're going to lose a lot of learners. It's where there could potentially be a lot of overlap. So although I agree it's second year content historically, we would try and teach this in the latter part of the qualification. It might be we have to try and bring that in a little bit earlier to try and then help deliver that and link it to the core. So when we look at what potentially we could do with topics like this, I believe, is look at the content within the core and then go and look at the content around maintenance within the specialism and see how you deliver those without too much overlap rather than covering things twice.
And I think, Rob, just to add to that, we during our curriculum planning events, that's exactly what we put on those plans there. Suggested how the maintenance aspect of year 2 could be brought into year 1, so you're actually delivering both together, really. So there's no real overlap there as such. You're just bringing sort of more the applied learning into it, really. So so exactly that. I think we've got a hand up there.
Sorry, we've got a hand up, Mike, just to bring in Mark. I don't know if you can take yourself off mute, Mark. And
yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, just a quick one, just on the subject of the year 2 content, etc. Am I right in thinking that us as centres, we can decide whether we sort of stretch the core out over 2 years and our learners sit the core at the end of the second year, or if we sort of go core heavy in year 1 and try and get them through it in the first year, and then of course any students that don't manage to pass the core in year 1 can then have a second attempt in year 2. Am I right in thinking that?
Yeah, I mean, Alison's going to go over the assessments of this. I'm not sure whether we've got time to do, but Alison, do you want to come in on that, please, and just explain a little bit around that? Is that okay?
Yeah, can you hear me at all?
Yes.
You can, fantastic. Yeah. It's a little bit slightly more complicated than that, Mark, I'm afraid, because we've done something called curriculum planning, and all our information that gives you the sort of ideal resits will be on that. So if you haven't had that presentation, everything that you've just asked is on that. However, the exam timetable for the BSE will be released in August this year. So we'll be able to give you the exact dates, and it is heavily geared towards the core in the first year.
Mm-hmm.
And the occupational specialism in the second year to allow for the industrial placement time as well. However, you are right. You can actually not do any assessments in the first year at all and then wait for the first resit, which is going to be in November of the second year, to take your core, which is your ESP and your obviously the external exam. The only concern I have, Mark, is that don't run out of time, because yes, you can take it in November the second year, but then you've got to fit in your industrial placement and your occupational specialisms.
Yeah, I understand that, and I agree. I think it would be better to try and go for the core in the first year. Definitely, as you say, just time with everything else they've got to do.
Yeah.
But if the learners were, they didn't make it, they didn't get through the core in the first year, can they then? I assume they can then sit in the second year.
Absolutely, they can then sit, and they can even sit to improve their grade.
Okay.
In the second window, and that will be coming up. That's one of the big next webinars we've got, which will be heavily focused on exams, and I'm sure Rob, Jason and I will look at curriculum planning, and Mike and I again.
Okay, great, thanks. And so effectively sorry to take up a lot of time, but effectively they could really get more resit options by sitting in the first year. Am I right in thinking that?
Well, they still only get one resit option. However, it's a very different qualification, because the qualification it's sort of, you can extend it for 3 years before they actually complete, but there still is only one resit opportunity for each of the external and internal components. So yes, you can do it at the end of the second year, but you know, you've got to think about then what about your funding? What about when you want everything completed? So yes, you will have windows and you can put learners in for the windows, but obviously it's slightly more complicated because tasks are released in a time-bound status. So you could get in a muddle with that, especially with the employer set project where it's released a week after each task.
Okay, great. And sorry, last question.
No, I'll happily sort of work with you on this, Mark, if you want to go into detail at some later point as well. Sorry, another question?
Yeah, please, that'd be great. And just the last question, yeah, sorry, what is the pass rate on the core, the 2 exams for the core?
Well, there is no pass rate as yet because that's decided the way it's marked, which is my next section actually. So that will answer your question. Whether we've got time to do this today or Rob's going to make the decision to do a separate webinar, I think he'll make the decision himself in a couple of minutes. But I've got it's the way it's marked is not it's not criterion grading, which it doesn't mean that there's a set pass rate. It will alter every year, so it will be very much like a norm referencing type where the grade boundaries will alter slightly. I will happily go into this as well for you, and it's all to do with the uniform mark scale and the raw marks being converted. But that's my next bit, but I don't know how far I'm going to get with it. But
we should. Okay, Ali, we've got
I'm happy to go through it. If you have the majority of people that want me to go through the assessments on the core, it'll take me 15-20 minutes possibly. I'll happily do it, Rob.
Yeah, well, I think we're going to have time for that. To be honest, guys, we were unknown how many questions we got and how long these slides would take to progress through, but we seem to be progressing okay. We've only got one more learning outcome, I think, left, Mike, haven't we? And then it's over to Ali, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
So if we look at the last one, Ali, I think we should have plenty of time. I think we're okay.
That's good news, yeah. So again, familiar ground for us here, tools, equipment and materials. So methods used to ensure tools are fit for purpose and the maintenance of tools. So again, that's on page 107 to 108 of the specification, but it shouldn't be anything in there that we've not delivered before. So any questions on that before closing that? Hand over to Alison. Neil's put in the chat there about the core is awareness of the specialist area will cover BSE in more detail. It's just true, Neil. Yes, yeah. So core is awareness. Obviously, the occupational specialism itself will cover obviously the more detail about these, you know, the plumbing, electrotechnical, whatever specialism the learner will choose. Okay, so there's no questions on that.
Can't see anything, Mike, now. I think we're all good to go.
Great, thanks very much. I'll hand over to Alison.
Okay, can I just check that you can all hear me clearly?
Yeah, fine.
That's great. Okay, so in these next few slides, I'm going to be unpicking some of the details of the core assessment, and it's only the core assessment. So looking at this slide, I mean, you've probably seen it before, but I just wanted to pick some of the details out for it. For the core assessments, learners must complete 2 externally set and externally marked exams, and that covers the knowledge from the Building Services Engineering core, component 350, and an employer set project, which also covers the knowledge and skills from the BSE core component 350. All core assessments, including the employer set project, are externally set and marked by city and guilds. So there's no centre marking in this. It's all marked by city and guilds. Each of the 2 written exams are 2.5 hours each and have 110 marks for each paper. The employer set project is 17 hours in duration, and it's based on a series of tasks. So just to unpick some of the details on how the core assessments are marked. So the 2 exam papers are marked using raw marks, which are the number of marks a learner achieved on an exam or an assessment. So in this case, the raw marks are 110 marks on each paper. And then the total mark achieved for each paper is aggregated, and that's converted to a uniform mark scale, which is referred to as UMS. And that gives, sorry, can someone just go on mute, please? Thanks, yeah, thanks. It sounded really cute, but giving one overall mark for the core exam. Now, that's before any grade boundaries are set. Now, the employer set project is marked, and that's also converted to a uniform mark scale before any grade boundaries are set. Then the uniform mark scale marks from the core exams and the employer set project are aggregated together to produce a final uniform mark score and an overall grade of A star to E grade for the core component. Now, what I've done is just to sort of give you an idea, and I don't want to come off this presentation and go onto the website, but I've put a link in there, and it's just to give you an idea of bringing to life what I've just talked about. So it's basically going to convert your marks to the raw marks from a paper and convert it into what that would look like as a percentage. So, you know, we don't know what the grade boundaries are going to be for the BSE core or the ESP yet, because it's an awarding process, but at least you'll have an idea of what that looks like. So if your learner gets, you know, 70 marks on one paper, you can use that link I've put to see what percentage it would come out. And I would imagine, I'm sure I'm not talking massively out of turn here, that it will be very similar to the marks that we have on our technical level 3 papers as well. There won't be a massive difference between what a pass, a merit, a distinction marks are, even though it's graded A star to E. You know, you'll have a good idea of where the benchmark would be for a pass. So I'm going to move on to the next slide now. And this is looking at some of the exam, some of the detail in the exam paper 1. Now, I mentioned before there's 2 exams, and each exam is in 2 parts. So part A has 21 questions, and they're sort of short and sort of medium type questions, and that's 77 marks in total. Now, what I mean by short and medium type tariff questions is that they have really low or medium marks. In other words, ranging from 1 to 4 for each question. So it's very much a case of, you know, a question could be just a state answer, and we'll go into this in huge amount of detail as I start working with the centres individually. And those sort of 77 marks and 21 questions make up 70% of that exam. If you look at part B, that has 33 marks, and it includes sort of 3 extended response questions, and that makes up 30% of the exam. Now, both core exams will follow the same structure, but each core exam covers different technical content. And it's really important to explain that the level of difficulty will increase through the paper, with the easier questions at the beginning and the sort of higher demand questions towards the end of the question paper. So that's really worth it when you're sort of planning that when you're starting to teach this. So the content that will always be covered in core theory exam paper 1, I've listed below, and of course you can see it's health and safety in construction, construction design principles. I'm not going to read them out because you can see that. Now, I'll go on to the next paper before I explain how this works, because I don't want to be too confusing at this stage. So this is exam paper 1. If we look at exam paper 2, now that will be released approximately a week after exam paper 1. So you will have to take the exams in a particular order. Exam 1 first and exam 2 second. Now, it will follow exactly the same structure as paper 1, but it will cover different core content. And on this time, and it's going to be the same more or less every year, that paper A will have 25 questions, and it will have 77 marks, again, made up of the short and medium tariff type lower mark questions. And part B will have 33 marks, and again, it will include or mainly consist of 3 extended response questions. In other words, questions that will require a significant response to. Maybe a page and a half per question. And the content that is covered in exam paper 2, I've listed there, and that's going to stay the same every single year. And even for the resits, it won't be altered. So that's the core content. And the same again as in paper 1, the level of difficulty will increase through the paper with the lower demand at the beginning and of course the higher, more difficult questions towards the end of the question paper. I'm going to sort of really look into this, the employer set project, because it is quite different to obviously the core exams. So if we move on to this, it consists every year, it's exactly the same, of 6 different tasks. The tasks won't be the same, but the actual amount of tasks will be the same, and they will always feature the same as report, research, project plan, presentation, collaborative problem solving and evaluation. But obviously the actual tasks themselves will differ. So this is 6 different tasks, and it's the time allocated for each task totals 17 hours. Now the tasks are going to be released in order of sequence at time difference. So there will be a slightly different time span between when each of those tasks is released to you. So you can't complete tasks out of order. For example, you can't do task 1.3 before task 1.1. And I think it's really important that marks, you understand that marks have been allocated to each of the tasks. And these marks have been based on the weighting and the level of skill required for that particular task, not the time allocated for it. Because, if you look at that, you're thinking, well, hang on a minute, there's 15 marks allocated to task 2.1, and that's only 1.5 hours long. And yet there's 24 marks allocated to, or more marks allocated to something that's 3 hours or less hours. So you can see it's all about the weighting of why those marks have been allocated. And it's as I say, so I'm just going to move on to the little bit more information to provide more information really and an assessment overview on this. The employer set project, as you know, it sort of samples sort of different sort of tasks that take place, and to sort of give you the idea, it's an assessment that is made up of several tasks, and that has to take place within controlled conditions, assessing the knowledge and the skills that those students have learned as part of the core element of the T level. And each project will be developed together with employers from the industry and to reflect the realistic types of developments, activities and challenge that happen within the building services industry. And the employer set project samples knowledge drawn across the core content. However, due to the importance of this, all versions of the employer set project will cover content from the following outcomes, and that is health and safety, construction design principles, sustainability principles, and building services engineering, BSE systems. So every single year, those sort of topics will be included in the ESP. And the project will only ever draw on the content from the Common Core component 350 that sits across all the specialisms for BSE, and it won't look at the individual occupational specialisms. So it's purely taken from the core. And now I don't want to sort of confuse this slightly, but if I explain that, I'm just going to go back to these slides here. So your exam papers and part A for both of them cover 70% of the sort of exam is made up of part A, and 30% is part B. However, only 60% of the core is in those part A and part B. So it's not 100% that you're going to be tested on. I'm very happy to explain that if you want further detail on that. What's different this year, I think it's quite important to say that students will be marked on the quality and accuracy of the written work they produce, because obviously it's heavily weighted towards maths and English, and there will be digital competencies as well. So that's quite critical. That's quite new, I think, for a lot of technical qualifications. Now, if I'm looking at the next slide here, this table, and I just want to check I've got the right one on this sort of, let me go back. Yeah, this is the assessment objectives and the weightings for the employer set project. And you can see how they are distributed against each of the tasks now. So you can also see that some of the assessment objectives are broken down into parts, sort of, there'll be A's and B's, and if you look at sort of the assessment objectives and the weightings, I'm going to go into this in a little bit more detail, if you don't mind, at the other one. So quite clearly you can see that assessment objective AO2, it's got a weighting of 54%. Okay, so it's very, very high. So I'm going to break this down in the next couple of slides. And this is showing you how those marks, how the 100 marks for the employer set project are distributed against all of those tasks. And you can see some of the assessment objectives, as I said, are broken down into A, B, and C in some cases. And the reason for that is it's to help the markers interpret the assessment objectives accurately. So you can see on research, there's going to be 9 marks. The report is 26 marks, the project 24, presentation 18, comes to 77, and then the collaborative problem solving 15, and the evaluation is 8, totaling 100 marks across all of those tasks. Now this is available in the assessment guide, but where I've broken it down further, it shows you how it's marked. So you can see straight away it's marked against the 5 assessment objectives, and this explains how I've broken it down into AO2A and AO2B. So you can see the core skills of communication come heavily in. You can see on AO4 it's broken down into AO4A, AO4B and AO4C, which is using the English, maths and digital skills. There's a heavily focused on those types of skills, and AO5 is your project. So you can see how the marks from that relate to this table here. Now, if I move on to that, I'm just going to take you back to this one here. Now, this is quite important, because it's where the assessment objectives provide an explanation. Now, this is in brief. There's a lot more detail in the assessment guide for this, but I want to explain why AO2 has the highest weighting. This is an off-qual requirement, that 50% of the marks are weighted on application of knowledge and skills. This has nothing to do with City and Guilds. It's an exam regulation requirement. So it gives you an idea of where the marks are going to be, where you need to focus your learning on it, and evaluation, which is always has quite a lower weighting as opposed to sort of using the maths and English and the planning skills. So that is it in a nutshell for me. But I know this is just the flavour. It's a very high level look, and I know Rob will pick up on a minute for me. And if there's any questions, Rob, that I can help with. Sorry, I know that's the last thing you need on a Friday afternoon is something to do with exams. Are you okay to come back in, Rob?
No problem. There's some reviews over a good explanation there, Alison. Thank you very much. So what we're going to do now is pause for any further questions. While we're doing that, there's a survey link on the screen, which won't obviously work because we're presenting. So I'm going to just drop the survey link in on the chat as well. And while we're waiting for any further questions, and I can get it to highlight, while we're waiting for any further questions, we would appreciate, Jason's beat me on that one, the link to the survey being completed. We want to try and make these as useful as possible. We've extended this one a little bit to we feel like the maximum hour and a half. We want to make these events. It's a very, very quick survey. It's literally to enable us to make these more beneficial. For instance, somebody earlier mentioned a bit of an event on the industry placement, things like that. So we're keen to support all centres with delivery. If you want a session where it's just general chat, general discussion with other centres, we can facilitate that for you. If you want a session on a bit more in-depth dive into the assessment, which Ali's just covered, we can facilitate that for you. So there's options on the survey to put as well ideas as what you want to support you with delivery moving forward. So we'll just pause for a minute or two. We'll see if any last minute questions come in. Any suggestions for future events, how we can improve these events, what you liked, what you disliked, please drop it into that survey link. We'll give you a chance to complete that now, so we make sure we capture your thoughts rather than leave it to the follow-up email when everybody's busy again. While we've got your attention, we just thought we'd get you to fill the survey in now. So a couple of minutes to fill in the survey and have a think about any further questions. I'll pause for 2 or 3 minutes, just let people delve into that, and then we'll come back. Thanks a lot. Okay, we have got some of the surveys completed. We can see the responses coming in. I appreciate that. It's the way we try and improve these sessions moving forward. They're very useful. Please be honest and open. We'll stay on for a couple of minutes in case there is any further questions, if anybody would like to stay on, but we don't want to take up anybody's unnecessary time. Just like to say on behalf of everybody today, thank you very much for your time. Hope it wasn't too much of a burden with it. Like I said, we've extended this to nearly an hour and a half, and we realise that's about the limit for people's attention span. But appreciate that. We've had some really good interaction today and some really good collaboration between centres, putting links in and things like that. I think it's been a great meeting from that point of view, if nothing else, around the core material. So appreciate that. I hope you all have a cracking weekend. I don't want to keep you any more than we have to. Thanks for filling in the survey, and we'll keep in touch. Let us know if you need anything else. Thanks a lot from me and the team. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.
Mark's got his hand up.
Oh, great stuff. Mark, do you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, sorry guys, just a real quick one. I know you're running another session on Monday. Is that a repeat of this session, or is that something else?
So that's more dedicated to construction, Mark. So literally we'll just be going through the first 10 outcomes instead of all 14. So it's probably a repeat if you've seen this one. If you've got anybody who's just construction focused, that might be a useful session because they'll be able to answer the more construction biased questions myself and Jason will be flipping around on that. Jason will be leading on the intro and things like that. But because the outcomes are very similar, it's more or less same content, mate, to be fair.
Okay, Rob. Thanks for today, guys. Much appreciated.
No, thanks for the input, Mark.
Can I just add to that, Mark? Just obviously on the back of this, where people have been putting in their email addresses and stuff in the chat and stuff like that. So if you have got construction staff for Monday's session, ideal, because obviously they'll be able to share details and, you know, get in the process of sharing a lot, you know, the good practice. So a lot of it might be repeated, but you may find other email addresses relevant if people want to share that type of thing. So it could still be useful.
Great. Okay. Thanks, guys. Much appreciated.
Take
Cheers.
care.
See ya.
Bye.
And
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.